Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to talk about the Corrupted Affix. It's coming to us in Season 4. This Affix is going to be very interesting, and I've had the chance to run almost every single dungeon on PTR thus far to be able to start looking at where the requirements are for each dungeon, how difficult it is, and what the meta is going to be looking like. So going over it, there's going to be 4 unique spires that are scattered throughout the dungeon, and we don't know just yet if they're going to change from week to week, but at the moment they're consistent every time you go into that specific dungeon. So whenever you click on any of these spires, you get teleported down into the realm of N'Zoth. Looks just like the real world, except a little bit more shadowy and more tentacly. You're also going to be immune to any open world effects, so any of like the lightning mazes in Temple of Sethralus or the artillery effects in the Motherlode will not harm you. Any harmful ground effects that are just lying around will also not harm you. Now while you're in this realm, once you click on one of those spires, it will then instantly spawn and activate one of the lieutenants of N'Zoth. Whenever you activate one of these lieutenants, you instantly have to be able to engage with them, kill them, and wherever they die will spawn a portal that will take you out of the N'Zoth realm back to reality. So the place that you click the spire and the place where that mob dies will create portals to the N'Zoth realm. So if you are having the first portal, you're going to be dealing with the Cursed Spire. And if you kill that Cursed Spire and you put it up on the left side near Priestess Alunza, and then you go to Volkal, and then you deal with the Entropic Spire, and then you drop your Entropic portals by Volkal's room. If you guys wipe and go back to the start, you could easily take one of the portals from the Alunza room. That way you can skip some of the trash that you skipped previously to be able to go back to Volkal. It always teleports you to the N'Zoth realm, period. You don't need to connect portals to each other in any way. It just gives you a gateway to go to that other realm. You can only click on these portals, activate obelisks when you're not in combat. So making sure, for example, if you're about to pull a boss, that everybody's out of the realm before the boss gets pulled. Otherwise, everybody's in aggro, everybody's in fight, and some people will be left behind. So the 4 obelisks that are in the dungeon are, of course, the Cursed, the Entropic, the Brutal, and the Defiled onto this one. So the first one, the Cursed Spire of Nyalotha, is going to be spawning our Voidweaver Lieutenant. He has 2 dot effects in the Crippling Pestilence and the Lingering Doubt. Crippling Pestilence will be a short dot effect that's going to be a disease, which slows the player, while the Lingering Doubt is going to be a curse, which reduces that target's haste. Depending on the type of dispels that you have in your group, you should be able to shut down this mob pretty easily, but if you're missing some kicks, allow the ones that you're able to dispel to be able to go through and make it easier on your group. A lot of these lieutenants will also spawn adds. For Voidweaver Malthier, she will be spawning a lot of these exploding parasites, a lot of these exploding scarabs. So every once in a while, one of them will start erupting and have a volatile rupture, which is a pretty long cast time that will cause them to detonate, deal a bunch of damage, and put poison effects onto whoever stands in it. You should be able to nuke down these ads pretty quickly and easily, or just let them explode at your leisure. The next spire is going to be from Samrek, the Beckoner of Chaos, onto this one. He's a very annoying lieutenant that you have to deal with because you'll be putting out 3 cascading terror debuffs onto the group. They have varying length and they can be dispelled, but it almost always guarantees that one or 2 targets are going to be feared at any one point in time, and it's going to be happening multiple different times because of what you have to deal with. So having something like a Mass Dispel can be quite helpful, as well as some targets that are able to go through immunity effects to make sure the healer can always dispel the tank. This mob will also start spawning, you guessed it, more ads. There'll be some Ravenous Flesh Fiends that will be spawning, and they will be ripping flesh at the primary threat target, which usually will be the tank. But if the tank is not within range and you have your melee still DPSing onto them, they will start stacking this nasty bleed up onto anybody who's nearby, similar to how like Berserkers would work in King's Rest. So the strategy under this one, burn down the ads as quickly as you can, and then start walking this mob to wherever you'd like to spawn your next portal. The Blood of the Corruptor is a particularly nasty eyeball jelly mix onto that one. You continuously be dropping defiled ground at the location of 2 players, and it deals a decent chunk of damage, around a 5th or 6th of your HP. And this Blood of the Corruptor will just despawn. Any of the ground effects will despawn once he dies. It's also particularly nasty. This is probably one of the hardest adds that you have to deal with, because there's a lot of Mind Rend tentacles that go out. And with these tentacles that are spawning, spamming Mind Flay onto random targets, they will have a tendency to start tunneling one particular person. So having 4 or 5 of these up at one time can be particularly deadly, and making sure you're able to start tunneling these adds down quickly before you start kiting the lieutenants is very important. There's a trend here. The adds on the Corrupted Affix are particularly annoying or debilitating onto this one. And with all those tentacles, you must kill them all, otherwise you will remain in combat. The final one, the Brutal Obelisk, spawns Urgroth, Breaker of Heroes. This is the tank buster. First, he will start spawning a lot of malicious growths like you saw out of the Gahun fight, that you just be able to kill and be able to shrink them in size. You can leave some of them behind. You don't have to kill all of these, as once you are away from them, they will take you out of combat. But you must kill Urgroth, and his damage gets incredibly heavy onto the tank, but thankfully he is very easy to kite. So generally once you pull Urgroth, you want to be able to clear a path as to wherever you're going. Tank grabs aggro, gets enough threat generated, and then hightails it to wherever you'd like to start leaving one of these zones at. And we went through the Motherlode. A lot of these corrupted portals, a lot of these corrupted obelisks were in amazingly opportune areas. They set it up for us in a very forgiving, very nice way that followed what is generally considered the meta in terms of what is skipped and what is not. That being said, because there's a lot of opportunity to skip around for where you'd like to go, it opens up a lot of flexibility in these dungeons to pick and choose where you'd like to actually take down mobs and how big you'll pull. That being said, while if you're focusing adds whenever you're activating these obelisks, if you're taking down the eye stalks, if you're taking down the flesh fiends, you're staying away from any of the exploding scarabs when they spawn, most of these lieutenant mobs are not very dangerous to deal with. They require some pretty basic focus and making sure that people are using their crowd controls correctly, which is really no different than what we're used to with Mythic Plus these days. The most significant thing is making sure that your group is going to be able to maximize your time, because the affix by itself, its very existence, eats time very quickly. What I mean by that is that there's a couple second cast to be able to go down into that realm. It takes time to be able to kill that boss and to drag it wherever you want to start spawning that portal. So while it does offer incredible skip potential, especially past mobs that otherwise have true sight, it also puts a lot of pressure on you to be able to put up bigger and more aggressive pull, be able to make the timer onto this one. That being said, as long as your melee is going full tilt, dealing as much damage as they can, your tank while they kite, making sure the boss is running full speed as best as they can, as long as he's dealing as much damage as possible. Most of the time our mob was dead or about to die by the time that we got into the position that we wanted to, so we didn't have to stop, let our caster DPS spend more time DPSing it or anything like that. So it wasn't too terribly unfavorable, because by the time that we kited to the right position, we got the mob down when we needed to. Whichever of these lieutenants, though, it's very important to note, is not killed from its obelisk, it will be spawning on the last boss that you deal with. That being said, some of these mobs are a lot more difficult than others. I wouldn't want to have our tank buster lieutenant, for example, on most of the last boss encounters. That can be particularly nasty. Most of these guys do not spawn their adds. In fact, I don't think any of them spawn their adds whenever you pull them into the last boss. So some of the more deadly ones, for example, like the flesh fiends or the eye stalks, are not going to spawn at all, making your life a lot easier. The tank buster in particular is very nasty, while Blood of the Corruptor denies a lot of space. So if you're in a fight like Overseer Korgus, it can be incredibly nasty having to deal with a lot of void zones, a lot of void spots that are covering the area. Having some of the mobs, for example, like Samrak, is really pretty debilitating as well because of the fear bombs that go out. So that also just leaves our Void Weaver as pretty much the easiest candidate for skipping and bringing it with you to the last boss. It just requires a lot of kicks, a lot of interrupts, and that's pretty easy to do while you focus your damage onto the boss. Set up focus kick macros, kick it every time that you have to, put in a Dispel or two, and you shouldn't have a problem. We'll have to see how much the other ones will be able to skip, because while we'd very much like to bring Void Weaver with us to the last boss, that way we could avoid a lot of the explosive scarabs, it's also important to note that the negative side effect of the Corrupted Affix is they could very well start putting some of these obelisks in incredibly inopportune areas. What I mean by that is some of the areas that we never really go to. If, for example, we're having obelisks in the first level of the basement in Waycrest Manor, where most people don't really kill any of the trash on that one. If you're having some of them deep into trash packs, for example, you could see it in like Motherlode. In the Motherlode, it's right at the start of the final wing, right at the start of the weapons testing wing, but we could also see some rotations where it's smack dab in the middle of it. And we could start seeing some different rotations and different change-ups which require us to kill inopportune packs in order to get to them. There is some potential variance onto that end, but there's also some potential positives. We haven't seen just yet, but it will be very possible to be able to start having some pretty massive skips at our disposal and seeing how dungeons can be done, maybe forwards or backwards, how we'll be able to work our way through the dungeons more efficiently, and being able to put up even greater and more opportune pulls for the groups that we previously didn't have access to. So this really opens a lot of doors for us, and at first look, and at the first run through, we'll have to look at how the obelisk will change over time, the locations and where they'll change over time as well. But at the moment, it looks like there's just a massive amount of consistency to the dungeon. You have a pretty basic requirement, a pretty basic punishment if you fail that requirement. If you don't kill all of them, you have to fight them at the last boss. And as long as you're focusing the ads, as long as people are understanding what needs to be killed, you have an incredible reward of being able to pick, choose, and skip wherever you want throughout the dungeon, making it so that a lot of early trash packs that you otherwise would hate to deal with, or other areas that you previously just didn't go to in the dungeon, even though it looks very quick, very efficient, now you have at your disposal. The left side of Ataldazar, as an example, is one part which previously wasn't touched that often, and the later the expansion has gone on, the more that well-coordinated groups have used the left side, and even pulling those colossi to be able to get an advantage. They also require an insane amount of interrupts and crowd control to be able to deal with properly. So if you're in a group that does not have that level of control, you can still use some of these more efficient routes to make your runs a lot easier, but you're just able to walk past the colossi when you're in the Nyalothan realm. This is going to be a big advantage, I think, not only for the most creative and the most hardcore players to be able to pick, choose, select whatever route they want, but also I think it's going to be a big boon for a lot of more casual players just looking to get their 10 or 15 done pretty chill. Because it offers them an opportunity to get past some of these absolute monstrosity of mobs that are set in our way for no reason. Ataldazar, Vokal's room, why? So if you don't have a rogue, you're not absolutely screwed. And you don't have to punish yourself by reducing your damage by using an invisibility potion. So in general, the new Affix looks to be able to be a bastion of consistency, which offers good rewards for meeting basic requirements and has a basic punishment if you don't follow it. That's kind of what I want from Mythic Plus. I think this Affix is looking very good. If you got a chance to check it out, be sure to let me know and what you think would be changed to make it better, more challenging, more interesting as well. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch y'all next time.